It's been a week since the Epstein Files of more than 3 million documents were dropped into the laps of the internet. And I know you guys have been begging us to cover this. So today on the Isabel Brown Show, we're breaking down an aspect of the Epstein Files very few seem to be paying attention to. That there is an elite network of depraved individuals who genuinely believe that they are running society and there's nothing you can do about it. And that some of the most wild conspiracy theories of the past few years seem to have a little bit more legwork. But the underlying reality for all of it, that despite evil's continued persistence in the world, the reason this is happening is because of those trying to remove God from society. How we can fight that evil and what you can do to change the course of history for the better today on the show. It's Friday, and as promised, we are finally going through the Epstein Files today here on the Isabel Brown Show. Let me just start by saying this. We could spend literal months breaking down all 3 million plus Epstein Files that were released a week ago today, and I am incredibly grateful for those who have a whole lot more time on their hands without new babies and full-time things and everything going on, doing just that on their social media accounts and on their podcasts. I do know you guys have been asking me incessantly what my take on all of this has been, and I just want to reorient us a little bit as we start our conversation today, that every single influencer and podcaster's particular take on an abject evil doesn't really matter. Good is good and evil is evil, not because your favorite podcaster or your favorite talking head on the internet identifies it as such, or even because you identify it as such, but good is good and evil is evil because God, the supreme leader of the universe, is the author of morality and of truth. There is a reason we're so uncomfortable with everything we are talking about related to the Epstein Files, because we are made in the image of God, and our inherent sense of morality directing us back towards Him can recognize evil as we see it. But don't wait to rely on your favorite talking head on the internet or on social media to discern the difference between good and evil. You have the capacity to do that because of the power of God Almighty. I have a lot that I want to say about this, and before we really jump into what our episode today is going to be about, and I'm sure we will revisit this subject many times over, repeatedly throughout the last several years when we have talked about the Epstein Files, the vast majority of what we are talking about is centered around child sexual exploitation, sex trafficking, and the abuse of women. And these things are of paramount importance when we are talking about the Epstein Files, particularly when it involves the exploitation of children. I've always cared about this issue very deeply, but I certainly have a new depth of appreciation for it as a mom, and hearing so many of these horrifying stories of children who have been abducted, who have been taken advantage of, who have been raped and sexually exploited over and over again for years by powerful, depraved, evil individuals that seem to not really receive the justice that they deserve, at least on this side of eternity. And we'll get to that toward the end of the episode on the justice conversation. That is important, and that is really the central issue related to the Epstein Files that everyone is dedicating their platforms to. I am incredibly grateful that that is the continued conversation that we're having, but I also think there are incredibly interesting implications of this 3+ million file dump that hit everybody's screens last Friday that very few people are talking about today. So being abundantly clear up front, I want to say that if any particularly powerful individual or any human being ever had proof emerge that they participated in what the Epstein Files are really all about, which is the exploitation and sexual abuse, mostly of children, I will be the very first person to run to this microphone or any microphone available to me and demand that person probably receive the death penalty, or at the very least be castrated and spend the rest of their life in a maximum security prison in solitary confinement. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. I don't care who it is. I don't care if it's someone I agree with. I don't care if it's someone that I voted for. whoever you are out there, if anyone had specific evidence come forward that they participated in that behavior, they deserve the death penalty. And I say that as someone who doesn't even know really how she personally feels about the death penalty yet. I wrestle with that all the time. In this particular situation, no moral qualms about it. That's what I would immediately call for. And I hope that anyone with a soul would do the exact same thing as well. But these Epstein files are a little more complicated than just saying everybody's name in them is immediately tied to child sex trafficking and therefore deserves to spend the rest of their life in prison. First and foremost, I think it's important that we reiterate these also include FBI tips received. So basically every single time federal law enforcement was ever given a tip about someone having a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein, their name and their emails are in these files. There's a lot to unpack here. I mean, literally 3+ million documents. So we can't just immediately jump to the conclusion that every single person Jeffrey Epstein ever spoke to was engaged in that evil behavior. I have no doubt in my mind more people than we realize were implicated in that evil, serious behavior and need to be held to the fullest extent possible of justice to try to right some of these horrible wrongs that are the pit of hell, like the epitome of evil incarnate, the worst things you can possibly do in taking advantage of a child. But there are a lot of other things that are coming out in these files that are very, very concerning as well. And that is what I want to spend today's episode about, because there are 8 million people out there, rightfully so, dedicating their platform to the most important issue of the Epstein files, which is the exploitation of children. But I think there's some more layers to this that are interesting to uncover that in particular the mainstream media is hiding from you. And that's what we are going to spend today's episode about. Not the least of which is the shocking, maybe not so shocking, realization that there is an elite network of wealthy, powerful individuals who genuinely believe that they control the world and that there is absolutely nothing that you can do about it. Nothing. This network includes former presidents or prime ministers of countries all over the world, billionaires, entrepreneurs, actors, the mainstream media, the science, follow the science, and virtually every single sphere of influence you can possibly imagine working together to try to control the outcome of society for the rest of everyone else. Up until very recently, for the record, in human history, that was the order of the world, right? The elites, the powerful, the wealthy, the royal ruled everything. And everyone else, all of the peasants and the poor people, just got in line and dealt with it. You did not have a sense of opportunity until very recently in human history to change your fate or the fate or outcome of society. All of that was taken care of by people who were far more powerful than you. But 250 years ago, a young group of revolutionaries completely turned that narrative on its head and fundamentally reshaped the entire trajectory of the entire world. They built, for the very first time in human history, the concept of a government, a society, a culture that was governed by the people, of the people, for the people. Not by and of the ruling class, for the ruling class, everyone else be damned, but for all of us. And we as Americans have believed in that ethos from the moment of our founding in 1776. And it's inspired countless other revolutions and societal movements all over the world since then. I think we believe, or at least we did until very, very recently, that our culture and our society still works that way. And it's supposed to. We are supposed to live in a society that is functioned by the people, of the people, for the people. But I think part of why these Epstein files are so monumental is because it's revealing that those more powerful, those more wealthy, and those more entrenched and well-connected than we are genuinely believe that they are the new feudal lords of society all over the West, and that we are their pathetic little peasant servant people, the plebes, who don't deserve to participate in any of the outcomes of society whatsoever. These people are trying to pull the puppet strings of your life, be it the laws that you live under, the products that you buy, the diseases that you catch, or the media that you listen to every single day. And when they work together, they are trying to rip away our heritage and our foundational ethos as Americans and as Westerners living today in 2026. that we have the power to shape our own destinies and that we can participate in the solution for society tomorrow, for our children and their children and their children after that. We know from people like Ronald Reagan over the past several decades that freedom, the very foundation of our society, has never been more than one generation away from extinction. But in order to prevent it from going extinct, it required a social compact of our engagement in society and our leaders serving us, not the other way around. And somewhere along the way, as is very clearly revealed in these 3 million plus Epstein files, those more powerful than us stopped believing in that compact. Stopped believing in the underlying social contract that they had an obligation to serve their fellow man in public service or in private industry contributions to society as well. That it no longer was a society of the people, by the people, for the people, but they had the opportunity to pull the puppet strings and change our destiny. We don't get to participate in the process. Matt Walsh covered this really powerfully in his episode about the Epstein Files earlier this week, and we're going to be showing a couple of clips from Matt's show and Michael's show about these subjects throughout our episode today, because I think it's really funny that my entire X feed still all week, we're on Friday now, okay? It's been an entire week since last Friday when these files dropped to begin with, that everyone is tweeting, no one at the Daily Wire is covering the Epstein Files. To the contrary, we have all covered the Epstein Files religiously this last week. And I think Matt and Michael both had incredibly powerful insights into some of the deeper implications of these files beyond just how evil people really are, right? When we think about, again, that central theme of the Epstein Files surrounding the exploitation of children and sexual abuse of vulnerable people, particularly those who can't advocate for themselves, kids, it's shocking to know how truly evil some people have the capacity to be. And I think that's one huge aspect of these files. But both Matt and Michael also articulate that the other shocking aspect of all of this is how widespread this connection, the interwoven network is, not just in the exploitation of kids, but in a whole lot of other societal takeover concepts. And also how much they have been doing this behind the scenes for so long that we just genuinely maybe wondered about, had conspiracies about, joked about, but didn't fully realize how deep all of this works. Matt Walsh calls this the power players in America. He says there are power players in our culture, and this is just how things actually work. Listen to this.
Officials in Russia, it seems that he got exactly what he wanted. Now, it can't be overstated how extraordinary it is that despite his reputation and his crimes, which he admitted to, Epstein had a connection with pretty much every power player and future power player in American politics. So here's a 2009 email from Epstein's publicist to Epstein, just as another example. Quote, just left Ghislaine's townhouse after party for film. Bill Clinton and Jeff Bezos were there. Director Mira Nair, etc. Film received tepid reaction, although women like it much more. Studio went for free party from store and windows for a month. Going to be in Wall Street tomorrow. More to come. XOXO, Peg. Now, the director that's mentioned there, Mira Nair, who's mentioned in the email, is not a name you probably recognize, but it is a name familiar to Zohran Mamdani because that is his mother, who supposedly is from, Nowheresville, Uganda, came out of nowhere to become the mayor of our largest and most important city. This, again, is perhaps the most important takeaway from the Epstein Files. And you may have already known this or thought that you knew it, but it has now been illustrated in very stark colors that there is an incestuous circle of elites, an exclusive club that you're not in and I'm not in. And this club not only includes, but produces, anoints the powerful people who run our country and the world. That's not a conspiracy theory. It's just how things actually work.
That's not a conspiracy theory. That's just the way that the world actually works. There is this incestuous club of elitist individuals who are all interwoven and connected with one another that not only have been in power in the past, but are anointing the people to be in power in the future. The fact that people have uncovered in these files that Zohran Mamdani's mom is connected to Jeffrey Epstein and virtually every other politician in our lifetime is insane, right? This isn't just something looking back into the past to be horrified about. It begs the question, where can we look right now, today in 2026, or into the future of the most powerful people in our society somehow being connected to this larger network of elitists who are trying to control your life? The Epstein Files include almost every president and major politician in the last 15 years. They have all been identified in these files to have at least met Jeffrey Epstein, if not had a continued relationship with him in an incredibly intimate setting. For the record, when we talk about President Trump in particular, because I know everybody wants to talk about that on social media this week, even CNN had to admit recently that Donald Trump did cut ties with Jeffrey Epstein in 2003 after being incredibly creeped out by him at Mar-a-Lago. Here is Abby Phillips, one of our favorite people in the world, host of a roundtable show I do quite often at CNN, articulating just that on CNN. Listen to this.
Breaking news, the Wall Street Journal is out with a new report describing the fallout between President Trump and Jeffrey Epstein. The Journal reports that a spa worker from Mar-a-Lago often made house calls to Jeffrey Epstein's home 2 miles away. But those house calls, quote, came to a halt in 2003 after an 18-year-old beautician returned to the club from a house call to Epstein and reported to managers that he had pressured her for sex. The HR manager faxed Trump a letter suggesting that the club ban Epstein, and Trump agreed, which does mirror the president's own public comments about why he cut ties with Epstein. The White House is responding to the Wall Street Journal, writing, no matter how many times this story is told and retold, the truth remains President Trump did nothing wrong, and he kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago for being a creep.
He kicked Jeffrey Epstein out of Mar-a-Lago for being a creep. This was actually said on air in December, so last year in 2025, by Abby Phillips at CNN, and goes to reiterate the fact that I said earlier that just because your name is somehow mentioned in this document dump of 3 million files, it obviously doesn't mean that you are participating in some of the most evil behavior of this individual. But the fact remains that this guy had connections, at least with a meeting here and there, with pretty much every single major power player in politics and culture in America for generations. Other presidents that have been named in these files haven't fared so well, and some really interesting things have come out over the past several years, included in these new files that have come out in the last week. Let's not forget that found in Jeffrey Epstein's mansion in Manhattan were 2 paintings of former U.S. presidents, one of George W. Bush sitting crisscross applesauce playing with toys, like throwing paper airplanes and Jenga tiles sitting around him in what looks like an office setting, but like it clearly implies that there's some sort of childlike aspect of all of this, like playing with somebody. And the other painting, of course, is the infamous painting of Bill Clinton wearing the Monica Lewinsky dress, sitting very sexually and effeminately in an armchair pointing at whoever is painting the picture. So it appears that at least some U.S. presidents have had at least kind of an intimate relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. There's literal portrait paintings of them in his private home in Manhattan. And of course, the Clintons have been very regularly discussed when talking about ties to Jeffrey Epstein and potential trips even to Jeffrey Epstein's island and rides on the airplane. The Clintons were previously refusing to testify about the Epstein files to Congress in the last couple of weeks. Eventually, Congress really threatened them to hold them in contempt if they didn't show up, and they have indeed agreed to testify, but are demanding that their testimony be public. That is all going to happen next week. Daily Wire reported on this earlier this week, that the Clintons have caved. They agreed to testify in the House Epstein investigation. That is a major reversal from the last couple of weeks of conversation around this, but they are insisting that their testimony be public. A lot of memes coming out about that, about if you're going to drag us down, we're dragging everybody else down with us. But this network of interconnected power and the elites, the power players that Matt Walsh was talking about there, doesn't just include politicians. It's not just the Zohran Mamdanis or Bill Clintons or George W. Bush's or even Donald Trump's of the world that we're talking about that are mentioned in these files and have been talked about for years related to the conversation surrounding Jeffrey Epstein. It also includes people with significant influence over culture. And what's interesting to me is in the last couple of years, we've realized that some of these people mentioned in the files or talked about as having a relationship with Jeffrey Epstein don't even really feel bad. They don't feel bad about having had a relationship with him. They're not apologizing for it. They feel bad about getting caught and what any sort of connection to him is doing to their public image. One of these people appears to me to be a renowned journalist, trusted voice of the media, Katie Couric, who in a late night interview not too long ago was talking about her experience attending a Jeffrey Epstein party and just how weird the entire experience was, as she giggles and laughs about how girls at this party were so young. And I was there to meet Prince Andrew. I didn't know anything about Jeffrey Epstein. Of course, this all happened years after he was a convicted pedophile and sex offender, at least in the first round of getting arrested and being prosecuted for these crimes. So was it really that much of a secret? I just have a really hard time believing that one of the world's most renowned investigative journalists genuinely knew nothing about Jeffrey Epstein and went to a private dinner party at his home with young girls and Prince Andrew. Listen to this.
Katie, Emily S. wants to know the strangest part of going to a dinner party at Jeffrey Epstein's house with Chelsea Handler.
Yeah, I know.
So wow.
That's a long story that's in my book. Yeah, I was invited to go to this dinner at Jeffrey Epstein's house, and George Stephanopoulos was going to be there, and it was right before Kate and William got married, and I thought, oh, I better go because it was in honor of Prince Andrew, and I thought, I better schmooze Prince Andrew. If George is, I need to get in there, and I didn't know anything about Jeffrey Epstein at the time, and it was super weird. What can I say? And the person I was with said, did you notice how young the girls were who were taking the coats? And I said, I really didn't, but of course, later we found out everything about him.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I was invited to it, and I should have done a little more research. But a lot of the stuff about him hadn't come out yet. So
I should have done a little bit more research, says the world-renowned investigative journalist who supposedly knew nothing about who Jeffrey Epstein really was and just went to this dinner party with a very small handful of people. She writes about this in her book that came out years ago to honor Prince Andrew so that she can try to score an invite to the royal wedding of Prince William and now the Duchess of, oh no, she's a princess now, Princess of Wales, Catherine, who is iconic, by the way. Love her. Interesting to me that she doesn't really remember a whole lot about this guy. She doesn't know anything about this guy. But in the recent document dump that just came out a week ago, Katie Couric is in the Epstein Files, and there is an email from Katie Couric to Jeffrey Epstein where she is thanking this guy for rockin' lasagna. So interesting. That's fascinating. I don't remember what I had for dinner like 3 nights ago, but you seem to remember what you had for dinner, and you have all of this vivid memory of what it was like to be at Jeffrey Epstein's house, but you didn't know anything about him. This email says, Katie, would you like to come for tea today or tomorrow? Jeffrey Epstein is inviting her over for tea. She responds, I would love to, but I have a crazy packed weekend. Thank you so much for the invitation, and thank you so much for dinner. That was an interesting, very eclectic crowd, and I know you're not a foodie, but the lasagna was rockin'. Thanks for including me and Brooks. Have a great weekend, Katie. How do you know something so intimate about someone that they are or are not a foodie, but you don't know about their very public conviction as a registered sex offender and pedophile, which was big news. This was a very public story. I had no idea. As an investigative journalist, I just don't know if I'm really fully buying that. Back to today's incredibly important episode in just a second, but first, the last few weeks have been freezing cold here in Washington, D.C., and I have found myself in need of serious comfort food like mac and cheese, soup, which normally I'm not a big soup person, a warm like chicken and rice meal. Ugh. And sadly, I haven't had any time to cook any of these things because we're way too busy putting on the show for all of you and doing mom and dad things around the house. But luckily, when I am busy and running around for the podcast and for my family, our friends at Cook Unity make it so simple to create a meaningful chef-crafted dinner for my family without all of the extra time of cooking it myself. Cooking high-quality meals takes a whole lot of time, but it doesn't have to be your time. There has to be no cleanup or no meal planning when you choose Cook Unity. Instead, meals are delivered fully cooked. You can just heat it up in the microwave for as little as 5 minutes. You can choose from a beautiful rotating seasonal menu of over 300 meals, or just let Cook Unity's platform provide personalized recommendations based on your cravings, dietary restrictions, and even your ultimate wellness goals. They have new celebrity chefs always joining, like New York City restaurateur Marcus Samuelsson or Michelin-starred Rick Bayless. It is commitment-free. Subscriptions start as low as $11 per meal, which in this economy we could all use. You can skip deliveries, you can pause your deliveries, and you can cancel anytime. We have tried Cook Unity for a few weeks now, and it has been a total game changer in our house. The meals are unbelievably delicious. They take about 3 minutes to heat up in our microwave, and I always know that I'm eating something incredibly fresh, healthy, and high quality instead of ordering out for DoorDash or getting fast food. You can taste comfort and craftsmanship in every single bite from award-winning chefs behind Cook Unity. If you guys go to cookunity.com/Isabel or enter code Isabel before checkout to get 50% off your first order. That is half off your first order by using code Isabel or going to cookunity.com/Isabel. So it seems to me these people don't even feel bad about their connection with him. They just feel bad about what it's doing to their public image now and are walking it all back to say, I never knew, I never knew, I never knew. Not just those in politics, but those very trusted in the media as well. And then related to this interconnected web, there's a much larger implication about all of this as well. And that's the global network of potential political powers and intelligence agencies that are implicated in these Epstein files in some capacity. Now, I don't know what this means. I don't think anyone really knows what this means yet. But there are multiple world governments, presidents, prime ministers, intelligence agencies referenced in these emails over and over and over again for governments all over the world, to a level that it's not a coincidence, it's not cute, it's not funny, it is wildly concerning and something we need to continue investigating. We don't know who definitively, if anyone, Epstein may have been working for, although I think there's a lot of assumptions that are coming out after this file dump in the last week. And I'm very hopeful that continued transparency we have on this and going through these 3 million plus files reveals who Epstein was working for and just how much the power players are in charge all over the world. But this is getting really insane, like to a level of insane that even the conspiracy theorists 6 months ago probably wouldn't have ever identified. This first clip I'm going to show you is from Matt Walsh's show, demonstrating really weird, suspicious emails between Jeffrey Epstein and the former Prime Minister of Israel. These emails were sent in 2018. Prime Minister Baruch was Prime Minister, I think, in 2000 and 2001 in Israel. I'm making sure my producers are correcting me on these years, but early 2000s. So he was the former Prime Minister of Israel at the time, but he's connecting Jeffrey Epstein to other Middle Eastern power players. The whole thing's very weird, and they're joking about make sure that they know, haha, I'm not an agent of Mossad, smiley face, over and over again. Listen to this.
We'll begin with a highly unusual series of emails from December of 2018 in which Ehud Barak, the former Prime Minister of Israel, discussed a meeting with Jabor al-Thani, a member of the Qatari royal family. And Epstein is CC'd on the communications, and Barak eventually asked Epstein, "Hi, Jeff, are you going to be in London on Thursday?" Epstein responds, "Unfortunately not. You should make clear that I don't work for Mossad." And he adds a smiley face to the end of that email. And then Ehud Barak writes back, "You or I?" And then Epstein confirms that he's talking about himself, adding a smiley face. Not an emoji, but the old school smiley face, the colon and close parentheses. And then Barak gives the thumbs up. Now, for context, because context is important in all these things, Jeffrey Epstein at that point was a convicted sex offender. He pleaded guilty several years earlier in very public circumstances to procuring a child for prostitution. And despite that history, the former prime minister of Israel, who was planning a political comeback at the time while also running an Israeli emergency management startup called Carbine, was going out of his way to invite Epstein to this highly sensitive meeting with an important foreign official.
Weird, right? Little weird. I'm not saying that definitively proves anything. I don't think it does at all. I think it sows doubt and confusion and a little bit of disillusionment, and is fueling a whole lot of conspiracies right now that may not be conspiracies at some point in time. But that's weird. Like, you're emailing with the former prime minister of another country in all lowercase saying, make sure you tell them I'm not an agent of Mossad, smiley face. And then they say, who's not an agent of Mossad? Me specifically. I'm not an agent of Mossad, okay? Smiley face. It's a little weird. And it's not the only time that Mossad, the Israeli intelligence services, are referenced in these Epstein files. Michael Knowles, in his show earlier this week, broke down another clip where Robert Maxwell was accused of being a multiple spy for many, many countries. He ends up throwing people under the bus, and he was accused in these emails of threatening Mossad, specifically, as he's allegedly working for several governments all over the world. Listen to this.
Mail from Jeffrey Epstein to blank. He passed away. It says Robert Maxwell threatened Mossad. And there are all sorts of weird typos and kind of odd formatting errors, maybe just in the way these emails were exported. But Robert Maxwell was the spy, reportedly a double or possibly triple agent for Israel and Russia and maybe the British, who had a big media empire. He was the father of Ghislaine Maxwell, who was the girlfriend and madam for Jeffrey Epstein. And Robert Maxwell died under very suspicious circumstances and got a funeral in Israel. So Robert Maxwell threatened Mossad, writes Jeffrey Epstein. He told them that unless they gave him 400 million pounds to save his crumbling empire, he would expose all he had done for them. In that time, he had free access to Margaret Thatcher's Downing Street, Ronald Reagan's White House, to the Kremlin, and to the corridors of power throughout Europe. Maxwell passed on all the secrets he learned to Mossad in Tel Aviv. In turn, they tolerated his excesses, vanities, and insatiable appetite for a luxurious lifestyle in women. He told his controllers who they should target, how they should do it. He appointed himself as Israel's unofficial ambassador to the Soviet bloc. Okay, so we don't know who this is to. This could insinuate that Epstein had a relationship with Mossad. It could insinuate that he didn't really. Maybe he was not particularly pro-Israel, in as much as he's accusing Israel of murdering Robert Maxwell. Robert Maxwell, who had been working with Israel, and I guess the Russians and the Americans and the British. Was he a quadruple agent?
So again, weird, right? I mean, they're talking about someone who is like a quadruple secret agent, who, by the way, also just for the record, in case you forgot this, Robert Maxwell is Ghislaine Maxwell's dad, alleged co-conspirator of Jeffrey Epstein, alleged accomplice of Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, also love romantic affair interest of his. Gross, right? This all runs so deep. It's disgusting. But this person allegedly was threatening Mossad. Jeffrey Epstein is emailing people about it. Weird. So we have Israel implicated in all of this. Michael also points out that Vladimir Putin is implicated in some way in all of this, with Jeffrey Epstein exchanging emails about arranging a meeting with President Putin. So here we go to Russia.
Epstein file from September 11th, 2011. From redacted to Jeffrey Epstein. Spoke with Igor. He said last time you were in Palm Beach, you told him you had an appointment with Putin on September 16th and that he could go ahead and book his ticket to Russia and arrive a few days before you. He also looked into security in Sochi for you. He said, regardless, he will still need to go to Russia tomorrow to sort out his Russian passport, which expires at the end of September. So he will still fly back to New York on the 19th. He will be happy to go back to Russia with you on September 26th if you go. Okay. How is Jeffrey Epstein getting appointments with Putin, the, at this time, leader of Russia for over 10 years? Is he, okay, let's just put this in the column of maybe he was working with the KGB. If he's a super spy, maybe he was working with the Russians.
So is Jeffrey Epstein working for Mossad, working with Mossad? Is he working for or with the Russian KGB? I don't know. We don't have answers to this yet, but it's weird, right? it's weird that these emails exist and that they've existed for a whole long time and no one has shared this information seemingly with anyone of consequence. Or maybe they were being held for a reason. There's a lot to unpack here. Michael Knowles also pointed out in his show an email from a sultan in Dubai back and forth related to activities with Jeffrey Epstein. So here we go to a new passport stamp.
It's an email from a sultan in Dubai, Sultan bin Sulayem, a big business leader in Dubai. Dear Jeffrey, I'm attaching some media clipping regarding the Israeli operation in Dubai. I will call you around 7 p.m. Eastern time. What happened doesn't help anyone. This is from Wednesday, February 17th, 2010. I don't remember this particular Israeli operation in Dubai. This would seem to imply that Epstein is either working with the Israelis. He's saying, hey, I want to talk to you about this Israeli operation. Okay, maybe he was working with the Israelis. It might also imply maybe he was working with the Arabs. Why is the Sultan reaching out to Epstein? Is Epstein a go-between between the Arabs and the Israelis?
Great point from Michael. It implies that he's probably working with or for Mossad with the Israelis, but maybe not. Maybe he's working against Mossad and working with the Arabs in some capacity. Who knows? But we have traveled all over the globe at this point, and we're not even done yet because there's one more Michael referenced in his show earlier this week that I want to show you, that even Jeffrey Epstein realizes some of this stuff shouldn't be put in writing. This is what's really interesting to me.
From Jeffrey Epstein to Joy Ito. Epstein writes, talk today. He says, my schedule's a bit crappy, but I could call from the car. Where will you be? By the way, I'm trying to get a friend out of prison in Syria. You don't happen to have anyone with influence over Assad, do you? And Jeffrey Epstein responds, not for email. This is one of my favorite emails in the entire batch. And actually, there are a number of emails like this. Not for email. All the stuff this guy is emailing about. Weird sex stuff, international intrigue between really every sector of the entire globe, scientific secrets. Did I mention weird sex stuff? All the stuff Jeffrey Epstein emails about, joking or not joking about killing people. And yet Jeffrey Epstein knows some things are really not to be put in writing, including, do you have influence over Assad? He has influence over Assad? Now is he working for the Syrians?
So now we have emails from a Japanese venture capitalist and entrepreneur implicating Japan in some of, I don't know, suggesting that Jeffrey Epstein has significant influence over Assad. So is he working with or for Syria or Dubai or Japan or Russia or Israel or the United States? We don't know. But it's kind of obvious to me that there's something deeper going on than just one really sick, disgusting pedophile doing illegal things on an island in the Caribbean. Right? I mean, that's kind of been the narrative up to this point, that this was a really evil guy. He was really gross, really disgusting. There's really nothing else of consequence to show you about the files that do or do not exist at any point. But that's really all there is to the story. Just a really disgusting pedophile on his secluded private island in the Caribbean. I don't know about that. What's interesting this week is I think what many people in power are failing to recognize is that people are not stupid. We often assume that the masses are stupid, carte blanche, and they are the sheep. And yes, in many ways that is true. And the herd mentality can really, really destroy people's capacity for logical thinking and critical thinking skills. But people aren't inherently stupid. To the contrary, we were created in the image of God Almighty. When we are seeing these emails between an American Playboy billionaire pedophile and the president of Russia, the Sultan of Dubai, the prime minister of Israel, referencing the Assad regime in Syria, the Prince of England through Japanese venture capitalists and more, it's becoming pretty clear that we have to confront the deeper network that is tied to Jeffrey Epstein's life and legacy if we are to ever restore trust in any public institution globally ever again. Radical transparency has to be the only way forward, because we're not just talking about, obviously, anymore, a handful of powerful people in media and politics who happen to be pedophiles. That's bad. That's really bad and makes people deeply uncomfortable and makes us call for justice because it's evil. But if this also means a multinational global infiltration of intelligence agencies, of government operations, of military capacity, who knows? People have a right to know. Or we will never have public trust in anything ever again. The other part that really isn't getting the coverage that it needs in the mainstream media, beyond this network of wealthy, elite, powerful individuals genuinely wanting to control the world and wanting to insist that you can do nothing about it, I think is that some wild conspiracy theories have been given some validity based on this drop of 3+ million files in the last week. Things that have nothing to do with human trafficking or the sexual exploitation of children, but things that people have been wondering about and musing about and memeing about on the internet for the past decade or so that now at least have a little bit more validity at the very basis. Am I saying that these conspiracy theories are true? No, don't hear me say that. But I am saying it's odd that we have some documented, verifiable emails that have existed for many, many years, a decade plus, in some file somewhere that maybe add a little bit of credibility to some of the wildest conspiracy theories that are indeed out there. Do you guys remember the whole conversation of the past several years of Joe Biden having a body double? That we were seeing multiple Bidens on any given day at the White House, and that we never really could know which one it was, that maybe one of them was a body double wearing a mask, a hyper-realistic mask like the one that they give CIA agents. I know, it sounds crazy, it sounds ridiculous, but there are emails in the Epstein Files related to Biden mask gate, including this one, a huge long email chain from FBI email addresses sent back and forth in 2021 that includes this little section smack dab in the middle of page 7. Hint, Biden is not your current president. The mask malfunctions on Biden, B-I-D-A-N, are getting worse each day on purpose. This will end badly for blank, redacted, who is posing with an effing clone on Facebook. The dude playing Biden ain't Biden. Real Biden was an evil, sick, angry man who abused children, including his own children. That's an actor with an effing mask. We have been over this 1,000 times. It's never going to change. Biden is shot. 2019 firing squad. Evidentiary support? No. But weird, right? Weird that these emails are being sent back and forth with FBI email addresses in 2021 about a hyper-specific conspiracy theory that people have been talking about on the internet for a long time that everyone said was run by like the QAnons of the world. But this video went viral years ago when Biden was president, if you guys may recall this. I think this was at the G7 summit or the World Economic Forum. It was somewhere where he was surrounded by a bunch of other world leaders. Do you guys remember seeing this? Here's Biden shaking hands. He's being led walking off stage. What's that? What was that? Back up. That's not normal. It's weird. It's weird. Something that you could easily say, as they did then when this video was going viral, was just an earpiece. It's a headphone. It's something. But then you start seeing these emails in the Epstein Files that supposedly never existed in the first place, but actually are 3 million documents. And it's weird, right? Maybe a little bit more credibility to one of the crazier conspiracy theories in the last several years in the world. How about this one? That wealthy, powerful, elitist people were planning to create the social contagion of child gender dysphoria, including the transition of toddlers, kids as young as humanly possible, from the elitist scientists and trusted experts in the world, including in this document dump of 3 million people included here, is an email back and forth from Jeffrey Epstein to a Harvard scientist about the benefits of turning children transgender, including as young as 3 years old. Listen to this. It is very simple. I will compare male to female with female to male. With greater molecular control over development, we are increasingly capable of producing novel phenotypes, more feminine men, by blocking testosterone receptors or through castration, and at the same time increasing estrogen production. The one blocks male features, the second encourages female features. More masculine women with heavy testosterone dosage have incredible external effects. Heavily bearded men. You would never guess they had a female bone in their body. First kind male to female is 4 times more frequent than female to male. The first is attractive. He is a woman with a male sex organ. So that if your fantasy is to engage in some interesting activities with male sex organ, otherwise you are completely heterosexual, it would be nicer if the rest of the organism is female, then you get the best of both worlds. So many transsexual women are very attractive and easily make money, which in turn they assert promotes their prostitution since they have to pay hefty fees for injections every week, but they are happy. Once you have reached manhood, even castration does not prevent sensations sexually. Contrast the poor female to male versions. They are unhappy and lonely. Blah, 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 blah. It's the worst of both worlds. If you like smelly masculine men, you want masculine experiences in your sexual behavior. This is rough. I can't read any of this for YouTube, but it's a very graphic email. There are hundreds of female trans videos and websites. I have never seen a male one. Here's how he ends this email back and forth between Jeffrey Epstein and a Harvard scientist. Okay. This is sent from the Harvard scientist to Jeffrey Epstein in 2018. BTW, we are now pushing the intervention earlier. So you notice your 3-year-old son has trans tendencies. So now you intervene with hormones. I would be frightened to do that, but who knows? Our Daily Wire news team also reported from this file drop this week that a famous trans surgeon had reportedly accepted an invite to have some fun on Epstein Island. A surgeon appeared to bring the kids of his girlfriend to Jeffrey Epstein's island. We are talking about Dr. Jess Ting, who is the head of transgender medicine at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. And he brought his girlfriend and her 3 children to Jeffrey Epstein's private island in the Caribbean years after his criminal conviction on sex crimes. These emails have shown in the file drop. The email from Jeffrey inviting Dr. Ting to his island in 2013 said this: "Hello, Dr. Ting. Jeffrey would like for you to enjoy a day on his island during your vacation. We can have you and your family picked up from St. John on whatever day is convenient for you, brought to Jeffrey's island to play with his, quote, toys and have some lunch." Weird. Does that prove anything necessarily? No, but that's disgusting. I think we can understand the implication. I have CC'd Jeffrey's island managers, Roy and Stephanie, as well as Daphne, who works in Jeffrey's office on St. Thomas. They can assist in coordinating with you. Please let us know what day would work, and you can take it from there. Head of transgender surgeries at Mount Sinai. Weird. Part of a larger plan with Harvard scientists to start the social contagion of transing your kids? Probably. And before I even go on from any of this, by the way, how many times have we been screamed at that, all right, everyone's already been arrested. All the bad people have already been arrested between Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. They were just really gross people, but there's no proof that like anyone else actually engaged in any of this behavior. Like nobody was even working for this enterprise. There's no one else we can possibly try to identify. Here's an email from 2013 saying Jeffrey's island managers, Roy and Stephanie, and Daphne, who works in the St. Thomas office, are going to coordinate this doctor coming to Jeffrey's island to play with his toys. Worth an investigation even? I think so. Those aren't the only conspiracy theories. How about the people who have been telling you for years that COVID may have been a planned pandemic? That all of the World Health institutions worked together to plan this years before it happened as some sort of social experiment for societal control. Weeks ago at the World Economic Forum, one of the most powerful people in this conversation admitted that on stage, essentially saying that COVID was a test run for social compliance I'm paraphrasing, but that was said on stage at the World Economic Forum. Now, in the last week, we have additional support for these claims and some of these conspiracy theories. Emails back and forth between Jeffrey Epstein and Bill Gates suggest that they are preparing for pandemics. Bill Gates appears to have sent an email to Jeffrey Epstein. Of course, they have redacted who this email is to and from, but based on people's sleuthing on the internet, they're assuming this came from Bill Gates, allegedly. An email sent in March of 2015, 5 years before COVID. Subject of the email, preparing for pandemics. Please find attached a draft agenda for the meeting on preparing for pandemics as requested. Let's discuss next steps. For example, how to officially involve the WHO and the ICRC, i.e. co-branding. Best regards, and I hope we can pull this off. Another email sent in 2017 to Bill Gates. Bill, Larry and I have been working on deliverables for my time at BCG 3 since you and I spoke. BGC3 since you and I spoke. At Larry's request, I've spoken with Roger, Mark, Chris, Trevor, Jeff, and next week, Jonah. So many typos in this thing. Everyone has offered guidance, advice, thoughts, and ideas. As Larry works together to put together any required documentation, we are trying to make sure we make this time valuable for you, us, I don't know. 2 areas where I am interested in terms of scope: domestic health and neurotech/brain science. I propose these deliverables. Please let Larry and I know what you think. Deliverables: to improve access and secure personal health data. Blueprint and/or recommendations for a zero-knowledge, proof-based digital system to secure private personal health information while allowing access to digitally redacted personal information. A white paper on consumer health expenditures in the USA. A white paper and/or recommendations on neurotechnologies related to chronic and degenerative diseases. A white paper on neurotechnologies as weapons in national intelligence and defense. Follow-up recommendations and/or technical specifications for strain pandemic simulation. Happy to do whatever is helpful or adapt along the way. Thank you for the opportunity. Email to Bill Gates in 2017 about a potential pandemic simulation, which has Jeffrey Epstein CC'd on the emails. Not to mention using neurotechnology as a weapon for the military. Representative Nancy Mace, who I know has been really outspoken about wanting more radical transparency related to the Epstein Files, like her or hate her, lover politics or hater politics, she has been pretty consistent on this, tweeted just 2 days ago that she is calling for Bill Gates to testify under oath related to his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein in front of the Oversight Committee, similar to what we are expecting from the testimony from the Clintons next week, which will be very interesting. She says 3 million pages of Epstein documents were just released by the DOJ, and these allegations are sick. If these allegations are false, Bill Clinton should have, Bill Gates, too many bills, all connected to Jeffrey Epstein. Bill Gates should have no problem saying so under oath before Congress. Nobody is above the law, not billionaires, not the powerful, nobody. So, planned pandemics orchestrated by Jeffrey Epstein, potentially. I don't know. It's pretty weird. How about this one? Do you guys remember a few years ago when Wayfair was under some really hot water because people were logging onto Wayfair to look at furniture, and like a chair was priced at $15,000 or $16,000, and the product description was girl, age 8, skin color, whatever, hair color, whatever, eye color, whatever, and everyone thought this may have been a problem related to human trafficking. That was never officially proven, although there was a lot of really crazy stuff surrounding all of these allegations with the Wayfair scandal a few years ago. Turns out, in this document dump of 3+ million documents, Jeffrey Epstein's assistant in 2018 bought a single unlabeled $8,453 item from Wayfair and forwards him the email receipt related to this Wayfair transaction. There's no product description, no nothing related to any of this. Immediately, this brought my brain back to the Wayfair scandal. And somebody went back and found old screenshots of all of this, of mostly storage cabinets. That's the really scary, gross part about all of this. Wayfair was selling storage cabinets for $12,000, for $10,899, for $12,899, for $13,799. And the product descriptions were incredibly bizarre, all around the same time as missing children going viral all over the country. And there was a lot of decoding at the time that the price of the piece had to do with the missing child's number or the date that they went missing, or so. There was a lot decoded with all of that years and years and years ago. But odd to preserve emails tied to Jeffrey Epstein related to an $8,453 purchase for a single item at Wayfair, right? The problem with these files, and these are just a few examples. There are people, again, as I said, diligently devoting all of their time, and I'm incredibly grateful for them, going through all 3 million documents and trying to uncover some of this. There's a problem associated with the added validity to some of these crazy conspiracy theories that, again, I'm not saying are proven true, but there's a little more legwork behind some of them, at least within the last week, related to Biden Maskgate, creating a social contagion to trans your kids, presumably because of sexually depraved adults, planning pandemics and bioweapons from powerful people in health, like Bill Gates, maybe. We'll see. Interesting. Or even this Wayfair allegation related to child sex trafficking years and years ago. And that is that we have further eroded trust in public and private institutions. Whether any of these things are proven to be true or not, this crisis and this document dump has planted perhaps irreconcilable seeds of doubt in the minds of ordinary people that I don't know how we regain without radical transparency about everything moving forward. And radical transparency is not pretty, by the way. It's really ugly and may involve a whole lot of institutions, powerful people, and trusted individuals have their reputations and legacies destroyed and dragged through the mud. Continuing our deep dive into the Epstein Files and what everyone seems to be missing in just a second. But first, it's February. Next week, in case you're not prepared, is Valentine's Day. So husbands, wives, daughters, girlfriends, whoever needs the reminder, it's right around the corner. Our friends at Cozy Earth are making it so easy to bring comfort, care, and a little extra love into the everyday lives of the people that you love. This Valentine's Day season, they are offering an amazing buy one, get one BOGO pajama deal that you won't see any other time of the year. I just got my own pair of Cozy Earth pajamas and I literally cannot take them off. They are the softest, coziest, comfiest things, and I find myself all weekend just wearing them around the house as I do projects here because it is one of my favorite things I've ever owned in my closet. This is seriously one of those Cozy Earth favorites that I cannot stop raving about. It's lightweight but still cozy and somehow helps you fall asleep way faster and stay comfortable way longer throughout the night, which as a mom with a lot of sleepless nights is basically priceless. Plus, it sleeps cooler than cotton, so you're not waking up overheated in the middle of the night while you're still looking your absolute best. New moms, if you know, the cooling thing is very important. It is thoughtful, comfortable, and so easy to love, whether you're treating yourself or gifting it to someone special who deserves better rest. And here's the best part, they give you a 100-night sleep trial. So if you don't love them, which I'm telling you is impossible, you can return them totally hassle-free. And they have a 10-year warranty because they know that you will want this to last. These viral PJs are so good that they sold out during the holidays, and now they are back with an exclusive deal only available until February 8th. You guys can head to CozyEarth.com today and use my code IsabelBOGO to get these PJs for you and for someone you love. And if you get a post-purchase survey and they ask who sent you, make sure that you say that you heard about Cozy Earth right here on the Isabel Brown Show. You guys should celebrate everyday love with comfort that makes those little moments count this Valentine's season. But has this not become a further indication that the people we are supposed to trust, the people who are supposed to be telling us the truth about what is going on in the world, aren't? How we reconcile that beyond radical transparency, I don't know. And I think that's the really damaging aspect of the Epstein Files, because it's not just uncovering abject evil. That alone is so important. and so crucial to regaining any sort of sense of morality as a code in society that we all live by. If there is any hill worth dying on, it is the exploitation sexually of innocent children. Period. Full stop. But also, if there is this elite cabal of powerful, wealthy, well-connected individuals doing stuff like planning pandemics and taking over entire business industries and transing our children through the education system and doing intelligence operations on behalf of various world governments, or, I mean, God forbid, even creating body doubles of the President of the United States, I don't know how you regain public trust in society without laying it all out there and proving it to be true or false once and for all. Because this gray area, half in, half out, maybe it's true, is only creating further seeds of doubt and more radical conspiracy theories with every passing day. That's what I'll hope for in the future. But the most important thing I want to leave you with on the Epstein Files today is this. This crisis has illustrated so poignantly how deeply important it is that our society remain rooted in faith and that America remains a Christian nation. Sitting with this for the last week or so, as all of you have been screaming at me for my thoughts, and I've decided to just take a second, as I always do. We talked about this related to the ICE protests last week, but every outrage cycle typically requires for some moral clarity just to take a beat and to pray about it before you post about it. So as I've been doing that this week, it's really hit home for me that humanity and Americans from across the political spectrum are so deeply disturbed by and enthralled with these files. They're like a bad car crash that we can't look away from, because our society, whether we've realized it or not, is based in Christian morality. We have an objective sense of right and wrong. We have an appreciation for the inherent dignity of the human person. And we have a deep hunger for something that is bigger than ourselves that can never be satisfied in evil sin. We know, as I said at the beginning of the episode, that good is good and evil is evil, not because we identify it as such, but because God is the author of morality and truth. And we have established our society on the biblical foundations of Christian morality as one nation under God, rooted in that morality and truth written by God himself. When we see, and evidence is emerging of depraved, evil individuals attempting to rip our society away from God and specifically away from Jesus Christ, we see an unraveling of everything that we have built over the past 250 years from the time our founders turned society on its head for that society, by the people, of the people, for the people, very quickly. And perhaps, for me, one of the more disturbing elements of the Epstein Files that is not really getting any coverage whatsoever in the mainstream media, certainly, but really by anybody, is the consistent theme that we see woven through millions of these files of Jeffrey Epstein and all of his buddies making a mockery of Christianity and specifically attempting to destroy our connection as a society to Jesus Christ. One file in this document dump, and again, I've seen probably a few hundred. There's no way I've seen all 3 million, so I'm sure there are worse out there. But one file related to this is really unsettling to me and is sitting with me a lot this last week as, for lack of a better term, the crux of where we are going wrong as a society and how something like this could have even begun to happen in the first place. It turns out Jeffrey Epstein, as part of an art exhibit, apparently, for all of his cultured elitist friends, was offering a viewing of anti-Catholic artwork that he called Christ, P-I-S-S Christ. And an artist named Andres Serrano was emailing back and forth with Jeffrey Epstein, laughing at the fact that Catholics were going to protest about this art exhibit which was, for the record, a crucifix that was soaked in urine. And Jeffrey Epstein was inviting people over to literally take a piss on Jesus Christ. This email was sent in 2012 from the artist Andres Serrano to Jeffrey Epstein. He says, "Hi, Jeffrey. I will be having an opening this Thursday if you're in town. The Catholic League will be there protesting." Invites Jeffrey Epstein to this art exhibit. Christ is coming to New York City. On September 27th, the Edward Tyler Gallery in Midtown Manhattan will host an exhibit, Body and Spirit Andres Serrano, that features Serrano's Christ piece. It shows a crucifix submerged in a jar of his own urine. If that doesn't tell you everything about the motivations and the intentions of these people, I don't know what else possibly could. Because we know, I have to believe, that Jesus Christ is the author, the centralization, the incarnation of everything that is good and true and beautiful. And when you make a mockery of him, when you are so disgusting and evil against him, when you try to rip society away from him, sin is the result. Exploitation of other human beings is a result. The eroding of the dignity of the human person is the result. The hunger for power and wealth and fame in this world, governed by Satan, is the result. I think part of why these Epstein files feel so horrifying and like something that we can't look away from is that it feels like something we could never change or do something about. When people are this powerful and this well connected, and this has been going on for so long, it feels like we live in a society where people just get away with this stuff, right? Nobody is ever going to be held to justice. Nobody's ever going to be prosecuted or imprisoned or convicted for any of these things. It's all hopeless. They're just going to get away with it. I hear a lot of that on social media right now. Rest assured, even if people aren't held to our human standard of justice and our legal system of justice, they will be judged at some point by someone who is far more powerful than us. They will surely be judged by the God of the universe. And God does not play around with the most evil that we're seeing in these documents and with all of the convictions and allegations related to Jeffrey Epstein and his network cabal of elitist individuals all over the world for the last several decades. In the Gospel of Luke, in chapter 17, verse 2, Jesus severely warns his apostles and disciples that anyone causing a little one, a child, a vulnerable person, to sin or stumble is so grave, the sin of that is so grave, that it would be better to be drowned with a massive millstone around someone's neck than to face the consequences of God, than to face the rash judgment of God. The consequences of eternity, I think we can have hope in this, are far graver than anything we could ever offer ourselves in our system of legal justice, right? And that's what we have to continue placing our faith in over and over and over again. But they're not just going to get away with it, and society is not just condemned to doom to continue repeating this cycle of behavior from elitist individuals, because we're not hopeless. There is something that we can do about it. That is the truth. We can do something about it, even if it's quiet and it's not quite as flashy as you would like. You're not going to like my answer. It's my answer to pretty much everything. It was my answer after Charlie was killed. It's my answer after school shootings. It's my answer after wars. But it's the thing we seem to forget that we have the capacity to do every single day. We can pray. How many times have I said the last 6 months? Prayer is always treated as our last line of defense instead of our first line of offense. But in this last week, just taking a step back and listening to the swirling everything related to the Epstein files on the internet before I decided to weigh in, it's dawned on me that God has the power to turn the most evil, depraved, sinful individuals into instruments of good. Scripture and church history alike is full, overflowing of stories over and over again of sinner turned saint. And not just somebody who like gossiped or did mean things to their friend once or forgot to pay their taxes or whatever. Not minimal things. Evil people were turned the most powerful instruments of good the church could have ever asked for. Mary Magdalene was a prostitute, turned intimate disciple of Jesus Christ himself, called by name by him to follow him. St. Paul was committing genocide, literally, against the new Christian church as an agent of Rome. And then he became one of the most powerful testaments to God's grace in all of human history. And there are a million other examples the exact same way. That is possible today, too, in 2026. We tend to think of that radical conversion as just a bygone era of human history, something that happened in the ancient church, but it doesn't happen today. But Christ is indeed not only the King of the universe, but he is also our Savior for all humanity. Do not mistake or confuse his ability to turn even the most evil, depraved individuals into something good, into a saint, if they are given the radical grace of God. And if we have the courage to pray for our enemies and to pray for those who persecute us, more than feeling hopeless and feeling despair. It's easy to assume that doing something about the Epstein Files or doing something about government corruption or doing something about child sex trafficking or whatever demands noise. It demands you to be loud, to be obnoxious, to be in everybody's face, to be dedicating all of your time to it. But I also want to remind you of this. Beyond prayer, we have another role to play in doing something about this in our society, that every single person, no matter your sphere of influence or the resources available to you, can participate in today, right now. Mother Teresa has a powerful quote that's also been bouncing around in my head a lot the last week or so, that if you want to change the world, you should go home and love your family. That's quiet. It's under the radar. It's not flashy. It's not sexy. It's not public. But what values we can pass on to our children can and will change the world. We may not be able to go back and change the past. And this insane realization that there are evil people trying to run society amok. But we can change the future if we have the moral clarity and the humility to quietly build the next generation. Sanctifying work for ourselves and for our culture alike doesn't have to be running to the streets to call for the heads of the evil ones. It can be, and in many ways it should be, and some people do need to play that role. But most of us can change the course of human history by changing diapers. And soothing crying babies in the middle of the night by putting Band-Aids on scraped knees and soothing tears for our kids. Most of us can change the world by bringing our children with us to church this Sunday morning and next Sunday morning and the Sunday after that. Most of us can change the world by pouring intentionality into godly marriages to strengthen the resolve of our spouses and the moral clarity of our marriages in the world. Most of us can change the world by educating ourselves and educating our children in the ultimate truth of God. Do not mistake going home and loving your family or prayer or the quiet acts of service that we give to the people we love as meaningless or as less important in the work we do to bring true social justice, the justice of God, to the world. That is perhaps the most important role we can play. That isn't loud. It isn't trending. It's not viral. It's not clickable content on the internet, but it leaves a lasting legacy that is far more powerful than you, especially as an influencer or someone with a microphone, making a statement on X or dedicating an episode of your show to this. Our legacy has to be bigger than hearing ourselves talk. Our legacy has to be built in what our hands are doing to serve the people around us. Are they clasped in prayer every night? If not, you have work to do. Are your hands connecting with your spouse and holding hands together to build something bigger than yourselves? If not, you have work to do. Are your hands picking up your crying babies in the middle of the night and helping launch them into the world as people rooted in what is good and true and beautiful? If not, you have work to do. There has always been, and there will always be, abject evil in the world. We know this to be true. We have from the very beginning of time, from the Garden of Eden, and it will exist until the coming of Christ again. But that doesn't mean we are sentenced to depravity just because the more powerful people in the world are choosing to engage in that behavior. We have the capacity to change the course of human history by going home and loving our families. So, this weekend, I want you to do just that. I want you to turn off your phone, turn off your computer, turn off the noise of the world. Stop waiting for the next influencer to make a statement about the Epstein Files. Don't bother going through all 3 million of these documents yourselves. You can if you want, but you don't have to be a good person or to counter the evil of Jeffrey Epstein. What you should do instead is take your kids outside, take them sledding, walk your dog, go get a cup of coffee with your friend, call your mom if you haven't in a while, and most importantly, bring your family to church on Sunday morning, because that is how we will ultimately continue to combat evil in the spiritual warfare that is raging around us at all times, and that often feels hidden and redacted like these files, but is indeed as real as anything else in our society. I'll leave you with this today to launch us into the weekend. We did this once before, right after Charlie was killed, and a lot of you said it really helped you. And so I hope that this will help you as well. But I want to pray together the St. Michael the Archangel prayer to continue asking for the intercession of St. Michael the Archangel in fighting on our behalf against the evil that is in the world, the evil that is governing these powerful individuals who are doing disgusting things, whether that's taking advantage of kids or potentially doing other things like planning pandemics and creating world government takeovers and the like. Pope Leo XIII, the last Pope Leo before our current Pope Leo, wrote this prayer in 1884 to protect our society against evil. And I think it's really interesting that now we have a new Pope Leo and there seems to be a new realm of evil that our society is often wandering into. But it all still is rooted in the same eternal battle of good and evil, of light and darkness that we see around us through all of human history. So let's pray this together and ask for God's moral clarity, courage for ourselves, and wisdom for how to navigate this moving forward. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle. Be our protection against the wickedness and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray, and do thou, O Prince of the heavenly hosts, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all of the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. Don't forget that the light still shines in the darkness and that darkness has not overcome it. Darkness will never overcome the light if we know how to reorient ourselves to seek the good and the true and the beautiful in the first place. Pray for justice, pray for wisdom, pray for transparency, and pray for Christ to return to be the cornerstone of our society again. Have a great weekend. We'll be sure to keep covering this on The Isabel Brown Show.